Last year Scott introduced the new Spark, and it was a pretty radical transformation, and the latest bike to get the changes is the Genius. As you can see, it's a completely different frame layout to the old bike. If you remember, the old bike used to run the shock underneath the top tube here, with a swing link about here, and the seat stage running up to that. Now they've gone to a very similar layout to the Spark. Got the rocker link system with the shock mounted low, parallel to the seat tube, inverted, running the trunnion mount system. So basically lighten areas of the frame where they don't need to. So before they had to add lots of extra strengthening around here to take the forces of the shock going into the top tube. So now they're basically creating this stiffness backbone is what they call it. So from the head tube down the down tube to the BB, up the seat tube area here, and then obviously the chainstays and stuff as well. Whereas the higher kind of upper areas of the frame, so the top tube, upper areas of the seat tube and the seat stays, they can reduce the weight, they can introduce a bit more compliance. What this also does, using the new trunnion mount system and the metric shock, is that they can pack in a smaller eye-to-eye shock with the same stroke length into the area that they would have used before. So increase standover basically, and generate more room within the frame to give you more clearance, make the bike easier to move around. So obviously on the Spark, they used a pivotless swing arm. Because the Genius is a much longer travel bike, so it's a 150mm travel front and rear, the difference in angle of between the chainstay and the seat stay during the travel is too great to be able to do that for the material to accommodate the flex. So they've had to reintroduce a pivot, and they're actually using a horse link, which obviously has advantages with disconnecting the braking forces and giving you a more active suspension under braking. So this is one of the top end versions, which is a full carbon frame with the HMX carbon, high-end carbon. This is an XL frame, and the complete bike just weighed it at 11.5 kilos without pedals. So for an XL, that's pretty good weight. Doesn't have carbon wheels. Scott are known for building lightweight, efficient bikes, fast bikes, bikes with lots of gadgets and gizmos, which we'll come on to in a minute. The other thing that they've been doing in the last few years is they've made their ranges in both wheel sizes. What they've done is they've created one platform. This Genius frame is just a Genius frame, and you can run either 27.5 or 29-inch wheels in this bike with only one alteration, which is the geometry adjust chip in the little shock link there. Flip that and you basically change the BB height to accommodate the different size of wheels. So you can have two bikes in one effectively. Both the 29er and the 27.5 come with what we would consider, and the industry would generally consider, as plus tyres. So the 27.5 bike comes with 2.8-inch tyres, and the 29er comes with 2.6-inch tyres. So they're big volume tyres, and they come on 30mm internal width rims. But Scott is not calling them plus bikes. It's just calling it a mountain bike basically. If that's not your bag, you can always get some normal conventional width tyres in there. So that's their thinking. Whether that works out, whether that's something that people, other brands will kind of, the direction they'll move in, time will tell. The key thing to take away really is that you can run whatever you want in the Genius. If you like plus, run it. If you don't like plus, swap the tyres. One of the big benefits of moving to this design for Scott is the improved suspension feel, which is something that's very obvious when you ride the Spark and equally obvious riding the Genius over the previous models. Now you've got a high leverage at the beginning of the stroke, low leverage at the end of the stroke. The old bike was pretty much the opposite, and so this is a big stride forward really for the suspension performance of the Genius. Riding it the last couple of days, it's definitely good on progression, good in the mid-stroke support. In terms of suppleness, it's maybe not the ultimate bike out there, but it's pretty good. And obviously with bigger volume tyres, you get help there as well. So that kind of helps smooth out those little imperfections. But you know, once you're up to speed, you're hitting stuff fast. It's the little stuff doesn't really kind of bother you so much. You don't really notice it so much. And under braking, it feels really good as well. Of course, we can't talk about a new Scott without talking about the Twinloc system, which is a travel and geometry adjust, on the fly adjust system. So you have 3 modes: open, traction, lockout, and those modes are accessed by an underbar remote. It's been refined over the years. It's still not perfect because you end up compromising on your dropper post position, but it's definitely a lot better than previous iterations. I'd say on the Genius there's definitely greater benefits to having it because of the increased travel and the fact that you're probably going to be taking it into rougher terrain, more kind of rocky climbs, etc., where you want to be able to effectively raise the dynamic sag so that you're not clipping pedals and so much on rocks and roots and stuff like that. What you've got is the Fox new twin chamber shock. So you've got 2 chambers. When it's fully open, both chambers are open, and you get the full travel, 150 mil of travel. In the traction mode, it closes off this lower chamber here and reduces the travel to 110 millimeters. And what that does is it effectively raises the dynamic sag. Say you set your bike up with about 25% sag, it will end up being about 20% sag. Do you need a full lockout? Probably not. Maybe it could be just a 2-position system, but I don't think that's going to change in the immediate future. I think Scott will stick with the 3-position system. They've done a great job of integrating the cables. There's a lot of cables, but it's a very sleek looking frame, and the cable integration and the integration of the Twinloc is very effective. When you look at the engineering on the frame, it's incredibly well thought out, well engineered frame. It's like, I think, 900 pieces of carbon in the layup of this version here. As you can see on this model here, the tuned model, it comes with a 36 fork. There's a really neat little mud guard that Syncross have made, basically like a sort of marsh guard that bolts into the brace of the 34 and the 36 fork, boost forks. There's a single ring and double ring versions of this bike. I think this is the only one that comes with a 36, the rest come with 34 forks. Just going to talk a little bit about the geometry as well, which has changed quite a lot on the new Genius. And as with every Scott launch, there's a fairly hefty tech book to go with it. I think that the key points from the Genius are that it's surprise, surprise, longer, lower and slacker, but I think actually for a mainstream brand, Scott have done a good job of increasing their sizing and making their geometry like pretty aggressive. If we look at head angle to begin with, you've got 65 head angle in the low setting and 65.6 in the high setting. If we look at reach numbers, we've got 445 on the medium, we've got 472 on the large, and 505 on the XL. So pretty decent reach numbers on those bikes. Wheelbases, again, in line with those, are like, on the XL is a 1270 wheelbase, large is 1230. These are numbers that a few years ago would have been kind of Mondraker forward geometry. Kudos to Scott for pushing the boat out and stepping out of the conservative geometry that a lot of the mainstream brands seem to be entrenched in a little bit, and I think the sizing is really good on these bikes, so I've been really happy on the large over the last few days. It's only really been the tyres that have limited the kind of capability of these bikes. It's got the Recons on there, and you know, they're a fast rolling, they're a capable tyre for most trail conditions, but it's super loose and dusty out here in the Aosta Valley, and you just need something more aggressive. But you know, I can't really criticise Scott for that because it is a trail tyre, it's a trail bike. For a trail bike, it's super capable. I really kind of impressed with the changes that Scott have made to the new Genius. There's definitely a lot to like. There's obviously room for a longer travel version of this in the range. There won't be the old version of the Genius LT next year, so we can only imagine that there's a longer travel version of this coming soon. So that's basically the new Genius, and thanks for watching.